Thank you, Casey. You would think that finding a topic to preach on during the Lenten season would be a simple thing for a pastor to do. Am I changing here? Hold on. I'm not on. Hold on. I'm checking here. Yep. And being technologically minded, how do you turn it on? Yep, that's what I'm trying here. It's not being cooperative. Okay. If someone wants to come up so that we could have slides, because it's not going and not doing anything. So we'll wait and just talk about upcoming activities and stuff while someone comes to take a look and find out why we're not on. Here comes Mr. Tech. So as they mentioned, coming up on Saturday is bingo, and it's going to be an exciting time. We were just at a bunco night the other night where we did not win anything. It was a very strange night for what's going on there. Thank you, sir. Okay, there we go. That looks right. There we go. That says forgiveness, and it should be. Yep. But we're not in the right order, Norm. What a night. Okay, well, then I guess we're going to have an interesting time. Okay, so we'll go back and we'll just pick it up there. So you would think that finding a topic to preach on during the Lenten season would be a simple thing for a pastor to do. After all, it's one of the most event-filled periods of time in the life of Jesus. One memorable, significant event after another. If you made a list of all the things that happened during the last week, it would include the triumphal entry into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, the cleansing of the temple, the Last Supper, the washing of the disciples' feet by Jesus, Mary anointing Jesus' feet, the scene in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus' arrest and trial and crucifixion, and of course the celebration on Easter Sunday for his resurrection. But given all of these, and I am sure with a bit of effort I could have found a bit more, there's still a problem. A problem because the season of Lent is actually 6 weeks long. And all of those things that I just listed happened in a 1-week period. So that means that if I could preach that last week on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, I could cover the day-by-day activities that go on. And I could go through each of those events that follow the last days of the life of Jesus, and everything would be just fine. But of course, that's not possible. I don't have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. What I have is Sunday, 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 Sunday. Instead, we are faced with the fact that for the 5 weeks of the Lenten season before the triumphal entry, it's not really clear what Jesus was doing and what specifically happened. Which means, in order to deal with all of these important, significant events, we're going to have to make use of one of those television show techniques. Now, I say those words, I have to admit, I don't think you watch enough television, and nope, I'm just not going to have those slides, okay. Now, I say those words because I don't think you watch enough television, for when I use a television illustration, only about half of you get it. And so I'm going to start posting a watching schedule for you so you will know particularly what shows you should watch. So when I use an illustration of that or what movies you should attend, everyone can nod with agreement and know what I'm talking about. Like, I can't imagine that everyone didn't know who Simon Cowell was. And of course everyone watches America's Got Talent, but apparently not. Now, the show that I'm going to be talking about to start today is the one known as This Is Us, which is one of the masterful shows in making use of flashbacks and another known as a flash forward. In fact, about 2 seasons ago, the father in that series died. in a terrible accident following, well, actually, it was a result of a house fire. But he's been in every episode since then. It's just a very strange thing because we know he's gone and buried. So in one episode, you'll see the 3 children in this story as young children, and another time you'll see them as teenagers, and another time they'll be adults with their own children. So as the time setting jumps backwards and forwards. So I'm going to use this with the sermons I'm going to be doing the next few weeks. We're now going to jump forward to the time just after the triumphal entry into Jerusalem of Jesus and his disciples. In fact, if you listen carefully, you can almost hear the echoes of the crowd shouting, "Hosanna! Hosanna in the highest! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." And if you look carefully, you can see scattered along the road leading up into the city on a hill that there are still a few palm branches out and a cloak or two that was not picked up after the parade went by. The young donkey and the colt of the donkey, always confusing as to how many there really are, have been returned to their owners, no longer needed by Jesus to enter the city upon. And we see that Jesus is now ready to begin the final days of his life. Kathy, can you check the fellowship hall, please, for me? Now, in the weeks to come, we will flash back to the Palm Sunday entrance and cover it in detail. And Jesus is on the move. And the first place he heads for, naturally, is the temple. He's going to his Father's house. He's going to a place that is supposed to be a prayer and worship, a place he has been even as a youth and has incredible conversations with the elders of the faith and the priests and the keepers of the law. It's been a very positive experience for him. It is a place where one can expect to draw close to God, closer perhaps than any others, because the Jewish people believed that God actually resided in that temple, in a place called the Holy of Holies. But to his dismay, Jesus's, as he approaches the temple, the house of God looks anything but a place of worship and adoration. Instead, he finds a marketplace, and that really sets Jesus off. I mean, there are other times recorded in the Gospels when he gets angry. There are other times when he gets mad. There are times when I am sure he uses his stern voice and look, the kind that parents and school teachers give to misbehaving students, and occasionally one spouse gives to another. But these episodes are nothing compared to how Jesus is feeling on this day. Now, to fully understand why Jesus was so angry and why he found not a place of prayer and worship but of marketplace, we first have to understand the thought patterns, the way of thinking, the beliefs of people at the time. The Jewish people of that time in which Jesus lived, perhaps more so than any other religious group, and there were dozens, even hundreds of them, wanted and sought after and desired a right relationship with God. Yes. And from the very beginning of their lives, they were taught, it was ingrained in them, that to be right with God required a continual process of asking for forgiveness for the sins you had committed, for the good deeds you had failed to do. Very much a precursor to what the Catholic Church does today with their confessionals. It was vital for them. But in this day and time, it was not enough to simply ask in a few words for forgiveness. If so, they could have done that at home. They could have got down on their knees. They could have folded their hands. They could have bowed their heads. They could have simply asked God for forgiveness, promising to do their best to never sin again. But that's not how it worked for them. For at this time and place, the Jewish people, to gain forgiveness for what they had to do, what they had done or failed to do, were required to come to the temple in Jerusalem, so as to come before the priest and they were to present at that time an offering that would be sacrificed upon a burning altar. You might have remembered this one. It's one of the best that shows just what we're talking about. If you were a farmer, you were to bring an offering of grain. If you had vineyards or orchards, you were to bring olive oil or wine. If you raised livestock, it could have been a newborn lamb, or one of the most frequent gifts was a pair of doves or pigeons. But whatever the offering was, it always had to be the best of the best that you were to bring forth. Lambs without blemish, first of your harvest, finest of your wines. For only the best that you had was good enough to sacrifice to God and the priest. For amazingly, it was a good time financially for the priest, for they were allowed to keep a portion of your sacrifice for their own use and well-being. And so they were very selective as to what they would accept when they would come. Now, I love that idea. Someone comes and asks Pastor Steve for a prayer, and then I just kind of put my hand out, and you slip a little something in it, and then I pray for you. And then if you have a big prayer, you slip me just a little bit more. Like I said, it was a great time for the clergy. Now, why did they do this, you might ask? Once again, we have to understand the thinking of the time. Let me give you the background of the story. At this time, all who lived in the world believed the world was flat. Humankind lived down here, and God lived right up here. In fact, he was accessible, or so they believed. We see that in the belief in many biblical stories. Like when Moses went to get the 10 Commandments, what did he do? He went up on a mountaintop, didn't he? So God did not have to come so far down. And he met him there. And we've all heard of the Tower of Babel, don't we, when humankind got in trouble? They thought that if they could build a tower tall enough, that they could reach God's house and just come knocking on his door. So stick with me here. The belief was that when the offering was placed on a burning altar, the smoke, the aroma, the fragrance of the burning sacrifice would ascend into the heavens for God to partake of. To better understand this, think of walking outside one evening while you're getting ready to have tuna noodle casserole, because it's Wednesday and you always have tuna noodle casserole on Wednesday. And your neighbor is grilling steaks and ribs and chicken. And you breathe in that aroma, and your stomach rumbles, and your taste buds water. And you go in and eat tuna and noodles. Well, that's what they believed of their offerings. When the priest put your offering onto the altar, the aroma would go to God. God would breathe it in, he would be thankful, and he would listen to your prayer and answer it. So, now back to why Jesus is so angry. The problem is when you are traveling by foot to get to the holy city from miles and miles away, or if you're lucky enough to have a donkey as a beast of burden, you've spent days traveling to get to the holy city so that you could sacrifice. And on a trip like this, it's hard to carry a proper offering with you and keep it in good shape. I mean, the cages break, the birds fall away, the lambs get dirty, the wine tips over. It's a terrible thing. So instead, what happened was that people started buying their offerings when they got to the temple. Now we're getting to the reason of why Jesus is angry. A temple is rectangular in shape. The far end of it over here was the Holy of Holies. That's where the ark containing the 10 Commandments were. That's where God lived. And the next section was where the priests did their work. And then the main section was where the men came and prayed and learned. And then there was this huge marketplace, an entryway on the outside. So what happens is that this entryway here became filled with stalls of animals and cages holding animals of every kind, food piled up of every kind that you could bring for an offering. There was there was straw, there was hay. It was a cacophony of noise and activity. And let me tell you, the price was never cheap. The merchants knew you were stuck. You needed an offering before you could go in. And if you had not brought your own sacrifice with you, they gouged you for price. So that pair of pigeons that was 5 coins back at your house, 12 when you came to the temple. They had to make a little profit. And on top of that, you were not allowed to use your money to buy it. The coin of the realm was not taken at the temple. You had to go to a money changer. Who wants to be the money changer in this? Well, let's see. We'll let Chris be the money changer. And you would go and hand Chris 10 of your silver coins, and she'd give you 6 of the temple. After all, she had to make a little profit, didn't she? And so you had to change your coins so you could buy the animals that were overpriced so you could go in. So what you have as you prepare to enter the house of God, instead of it being holy and solemn, instead of it being a hallowed place, sanctified, venerated, essentially you had a zoo, a circus, anything but a temple dedicated to the Lord. Now here's the really important part for today's sermon. At this point in time, Jesus perceives that the leaders of the Jewish faith had lost their focus on what it was they were supposed to do. Listen to that again, that the leaders of the Jewish faith had lost their focus on what it was they were really supposed to be doing. They lost their emphasis, their priority, their concentration. They lost track of their reason for being, which was to bring God and man together, which was to reveal the holy to humankind, which was to show God as the divine, caring, loving, compassionate person that he was, and who sought out to help you in every way possible. That's what was supposed to be happening at the temple. Instead, they had entered the business full-time, lock, stock, and barrel of selling forgiveness. That's what they were doing, selling forgiveness. If you wanted to be right with the Lord, Becky, no problem. You just bring the right offering. Kathy, I know what you've been doing all week. You better bring a better offering here. Over here, you had to bring that. And so they were in the business of selling forgiveness. And that's why Jesus went ballistic. That's why he flew off his stack. This is the marketplace, by the way. Just to give you an idea, this is the entrance into the temple, the holy place of God. This is what the people walked through. You could tell how righteous and holy you would feel as you came through that. So Jesus goes ballistic. He blows his stack. He loses his cool. He flows off the handle. I had some other ones too, but they were too colorful for church. One that I really wanted to use, but I'd hear about it from my wife on the way home. You can't have said that in church, did you? Jesus is angry. He makes this rope of cords. He starts knocking over tables. He starts scattering animals. He starts pushing people out of the way. People are fleeing left and right. My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. And so he does all that he can. He does it because the temple and those who were in charge of it, with operating it, had lost their focus, forgotten their reason for being, and they had forgotten who and what they were. Okay, now on to the difficult part of the sermon. To our modern day world and to Orangethorpe Christian Church some 2,000 years later, where this lesson needs now to be applied. And I tell you right now, I will cry through this portion. I know it's hard. Susan and I begin to cry each time we think about it. But my time as your pastor is coming to an end. So I can follow through on a commitment that I made 3 years ago to Lions Club International, and that they have been preparing me for ever since. So there is a concern about who will fill this pulpit, who will be your new permanent pastor, who will stand by you for years ahead and guide and direct your ministry. Our church is looking for a new pastor. We have a pastoral search committee They have met with the Reverend Richie Sanchez, our regional minister, and talked about the possible candidates who might fill this pulpit on a permanent long-term basis. It's not an easy process to go through, but it will end successfully if you as a congregation decide what it is you believe Orangethorpe Christian Church should be doing in its ministry. You have to have a very clear idea that we are the church and this is what we want to do. You must find what your focus is going to be in the years to come. You must determine what your identity will be and how you will want our members and community to know us. You must determine what our ministry and purpose is going to be. And when you interview these new candidates, you must tell them who you are, what you want to do, and where you see this congregation being in the next 3, 5, 10 years. And then you ask them this question. Here's for the Pastoral Search Committee. Do you believe that you can lead and direct us in making this happen? For we are going to make it very clear that this church will never be a marketplace that Jesus is ashamed of. That will never happen here. You need to make it very clear that this place can never be called a den of thieves, but that it is a house of worship and prayer. We do not intend to be one of the disciple churches that have closed their doors. You cannot do that. We have lost too many good congregations. There is a life and spirit here that must continue. So you must tell them and ask them, can you share our ministry? You are not here to lead us down the path to our closing. You are not here to hold our hands while we slowly die off. You are not here just to be here till we wait till the last person is gone and then you close the lights. This church has a future, an incredible ministry ahead, and you must have a definite view. And when those pastoral candidates come before you, are you willing to work and do what is possible? We want you to do everything you can to make sure that our ministry continues and thrives. That is our purpose. That is our being. Years ago, 2,000 years ago, the Jewish people lost their focus. They turned their temple into a marketplace. We will not follow that pattern. We are going to be an outstanding symbol of what churches are going to be if you make a decision what you want to be and make sure that your new pastor follows that. Amen.